Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. The world is attempting to redefine marriage in accord with every shifting cultural view. In the Christian community, there is confusion about God's plan or whether or not one even exists. In sharp contrast, God has had a specific plan for marriage from the beginning, a plan founded on the reality which defines a covenant relationship, the sharing and merger of identity and nature termed a one flesh relationship in the Scriptures. Building on the understanding of covenant developed in volume 1 of this series, this second interview with Dr. Mark Johnson is building on the understanding that volume 2 contrasts the outcome of our culture's approach to love, intimacy, and marriage with God's plan. God has a detailed plan to build the best marriages, one which fulfills the deepest desires of our heart. This plan instructs us on how to treat each other so as to build the strongest hearts towards each other, but there is far more. God has built mechanisms within us as well as drives and desires which His plan coordinates into an effective approach to produce mutual growth and transformation in the context of a safe, supportive relationship. God's plan is designed to develop people capable of loving for a lifetime through all the challenges of family life. Dr. Mark Johnson trained as a surgeon, now practicing prolotherapy in the Nashville area, has a decades-long passion for understanding the plan of God inherent in covenant relationships. After building a happily ever after love affair with his wife Holly, raising 7 children, and teaching and mentoring the Christian community for decades, Dr. Johnson has field-tested and proven all the insights shared in this book series. He and Holly share life in many ways, building a medical practice, architecting their own home, ballroom dancing, hiking, various art forms, and chasing children and grandchildren all over the world. Here to talk about his new book, The Covenant of Marriage, God's plan to produce deepest love, strongest relationships, growth, and personal transformation, is our returning guest, Dr. Mark Johnson. Mark, great to see you this morning. Hope you are doing well.
Rabbi Eric, I am. It's truly a pleasure. I enjoyed the last time, and I look forward to today.
Well, it was the last time was a deep exploration into the concept of covenant, and we broke it down to being a almost an if-then scenario. Really looking at John 3:16 as the covenant of God, as the last covenant of God for God so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son. That was His part. And then our part was whomsoever would believe would not perish and have eternal life. So we see in this covenant that there are 2 parties to the covenant. One performs and there's a reasonable expectation the other will perform their separate but unique part of this relationship. And you've come into this now and taken the concept of covenant and now going into the applied aspect of covenant. What led you to start with marriage in the application of the covenant concept?
Well, there are 3 covenants that share a common fundamental nature. One of them is a blood covenant, and that was what was studied by Clay Trumbull as a kind of stepping off point to understanding the new covenant. And then marriage is another identity-changing covenant. And for just a second, let's go back to John 3:16. What preceded Jesus' statement was Nicodemus coming in, and the things that, it was a contract that was based on performance. You either did certain things or did not do certain things. Now, the problem is there were so many things to do that was basically an undoable list. So several people came to Jesus asking for the short list. Okay, this entire thing is basically not possible. So what does God really care about? What must we do to do the works of God in John 6? Nicodemus came to Jesus and said, we know you're from God. In other words, I'm here to be instructed by you. What he heard, though, and what I believe he was waiting to hear was the short list, but he heard something that really puzzled him. which was you must be born again. Now, from a contractual standpoint, that's a problem because how do I do born again? How do I fulfill that part of the contract? And then when we get to John 6, Jesus is basically enlarging on that. He says, basically, believe in me, believe the words I'm saying to you right now, believe in me. I'm the bread that came down from heaven. And everybody was already buzzing a little bit about I'm the bread that came down from heaven. But the real bombshell was a few verses later when he said, believe in me, and now eat my flesh and drink my blood. Now, I remember reading that the first time, and I was really taken aback. It's like, what in the world is he talking about? And you see the reaction of the crowd. Everybody, you could hear a pin drop, and everybody stepped back a couple of steps, and the room erupted. Like, what is he saying? Well, we think that when we see that reaction, people are reacting because they're as puzzled as we are, but that isn't true at all. Because in that culture, people understood a blood covenant. Blood covenants were practiced commonly back in biblical times in Israel. So when people heard eat my flesh and drink my blood, they understood exactly what he was saying, which is I'm inviting you into a very specific kind of relationship with me, claiming to be God and demonstrating it in the last 24 hours very convincingly by walking halfway across the Sea of Galilee and feeding 5,000 men and women and children out of a lunch pail. So you have Jesus standing in front of people, beginning to unveil the most wonderful imaginable offer. And yet these people are so taken aback that most turned around and walked out of the room. So if we think about that, what you're seeing is a disconnect between what everyone expects, which is purely a contractual thing. All I need to do is do certain things and I'm in good with God. What Jesus did was he redirected attention as we're looking at the contractual list of things to do, it is undoable, simply. Because it really requires that we be transformed in order to do these things. So what God has done in this form of covenant is to transform us into a new creature. We have a new nature. We now are joined to God by a bond of identity and nature. The Holy Spirit comes and indwells us. So we now are a new creature approaching these same tasks. Now, that same thing translates into marriage. Now, the fundamental question is when you're laying on the bed at night and you see the person next to you, who do you see? Do you see somebody that's the other person, the person that's to a degree standing in the way of your agenda, the person that's to a degree taking up the finite resources and keeping you in some ways from getting your way? Like if you think your path to glory is getting your way and having things your way, now you've got two kingdoms. You have a kingdom and a queendom that are now competing for resources and trying to leverage each other to get their way. Okay, that's the two separate individual plan, or what I would call the competing kingdoms plan. Covenant is a one kingdom plan. Okay, and I remember this when this was first dawning on me. The importance of these concepts were first becoming evident in my life. I remember what I would call the stopping point for love. Like I'm called to love my wife. I feel tremendous loving feelings for my wife. I want to do a lot of really good things for her, but some of the things I would be called on to do by love, there was a stopping point that kept me from wanting to do those things. What is that stopping point? It's our self-interest. Okay, if what I was called on to do by love too much violated my sense of self-interest, then what wins? Often, and it could go either way, but more often than not, my self-interest wins out because I'm really, by the marriage, trying to build my life and my life made better. Okay, but it really dawned on me, it hit me like a freight train, let me put it better, that in covenant, I have now become a new person. I have now become conjoined at the level of identity to my wife. So when I look at this other person, I'm not looking at the other person. I'm literally looking at an extension of myself and vice versa. Now, if myself has changed, what happened? So my true self-interest changes. The problem is my life, my guidance system hasn't really gotten the memo. You know, we walk into a marriage in the habit of treating people in certain ways and looking at people in certain ways and doing certain things. What dawned on me first was that my self-interest now incorporates the legitimate interests of my wife just as strongly as it does my own legitimate needs. So now when I'm trying to craft an approach, if I'm going to really support my self-interest, I've also got to support hers and vice versa. So that just completely changed for me. That stopping point, suddenly there was nothing that stood in the way of loving her completely, because what I found was that old sense of self-interest that was me didn't even exist anymore. It was the interest of a self that no longer existed, a single person that I had learned to be, that I now am not. So for me, that was a game changer.
You know, when you take a look at James 4 and 1, this is really where this plays out. It's, you know, what causes conflicts and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your passions at war within you? You crave what you do not have. You kill and covet, but you're not able to attain it because you ask for selfish motivations, selfish reasons. And
Absolutely.
there's a identity in the world that the world's trying to pitch people that you are a unique individual, you're self-identified, and if you buy into this marriage covenant concept of the two shall become one, well then where's your identity? Where's the self in this merger of complementary compound unity? And when you begin to look at God's plan and the Hebrew text, he talks about echad and yachad, which are singular words. They mean one, but they mean a multiplicity of one, a compound unity of one. It is like one bunch of grapes which has many parts, but it's still just one bunch. And so when we look at this compound unity, we understand in the Hebrew text all the implications of, for this reason, a man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one. It's a compound unity. There's still an individual identity, but there is an identity of the sum of the parts, which is unique, but does not discount, does not divorce from, does not break away from this individual identity. It's a complementarian kind of relationship as opposed to a conflict-based or competing agendas.
Right. And, you know, if we are in a marriage that we view as a contract, we enter a contract for self-interest, my life made better. We are only bound by agreement. You know, we agree to continue in this, and given that the real underlying reason we went into this was our life made better, if the other person isn't making my life better, you know, that's a very weak glue to hold us together. You know, it is very easy to see the other person no longer being value added to my life. This isn't working for me anymore, to then think the other person has breached the contract and simply walk off. It fully justified in doing so because the other person failed in their primary duty, which is to make my life better. Okay, so instead, in a covenant, the one flesh, as you say, the word one flesh is the same as God is one. So we're talking about the Trinity as a model for a marriage relationship. But coincidentally, the author and conveyor of this relationship, if we look back at blood covenants, which have also been present throughout history with about the same extent as marriage across cultures, across the world, throughout history, in the scriptures, we see a list of things to do and be. the way Trumbull put this together is there are four primary characteristics of this kind of identity altering covenant. One is the fact that our identity has changed and we are now joined in a particular way. The second characteristic is that being the case, because of this, both of our lives that we bring together are now fully conjoined. In other words, not only is my inner life joined with somebody, but now every part of my outer life is also now joined with them. There's no protected personal space. There's no more mine or yours. It's just ours. Then thirdly, there are a very defined set of responsibilities and duties and obligations that historically have been a part of blood covenants and also marriage up until recently. That was well understood by most cultures. My first and foremost duty is to honor my wife above all else, and then to protect her, provide for her, defend her, and many. The last thing is the position that this relationship is to occupy in my life. If this is a joining at the very core of my being, and if everything in my life flows out from that core, well, this relationship at the very core of my being should now be the center, the integrating point for everything else in my life. As opposed to my job is more important, my friends are more important, this positions that relationship in a very particular way. And unless we get that, we're going to go through the transformative and growth processes that God has built into this relationship. This relationship isn't just a tie that binds, it's also a very detailed plan to grow us up, and also to take our guidance system that comes in groomed by the world to build a relationship with one hand while we're tearing it down with the other hand. God wants us to love consistently. Now, when we're just feeling the love, when we're just overwhelmingly in love with somebody, we want to do these things. However, when that feeling fades, our other parts of our guidance system take over and we begin to do very unloving things. So again, we've got this tug of war between building and tearing down. What God wants to see, and with this relationship through our vows and through the motivational system within covenant, it's designed to help us more and more and more to love consistently. Not fall into tearing things up, but okay, well, what happens if we do that? Well, everybody wants to build love for a lifetime. This is really about how our hearts work. It's about being able to trust somebody and entrust yourself to them, confident that they're going to come through in the clutch. It's about growing us up, growing our character, growing our willpower, growing our fidelity, all perseverance, all the many virtues in the scripture. You look at every one of the virtues that is commended, every one of those things are built by going through the process of learning to follow through and be the things that we're called on to do and to be in covenant. So this thing is this massive plan that is designed to not only build the best relationship and the best heart experience, but also to grow us into people who can now take on the rest of life, be good parents, be good members of a community, a spiritual community, be good citizens, and build a better world.
Mark, when we take a look at the things that divide marriages, oftentimes it is when hard times come. Possibly in the form of a tragedy, possibly a job loss, child sickness, or spousal sickness. And, there's no cliche, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. In marriage, it seems that when the going gets tough, the people leave. And, that's the vow which is taken, which is so interesting, that there's a marital vow. Scripture tells us to make no vow before man. Let our yes be yes and our no be no. And yet we've introduced the concept, even in the Christian and the Jewish marriage ceremony, into making a vow. Even though Scripture kind of warns against doing that, swearing an oath or taking a vow, but the way it's phrased, it's a confirmation of the covenant
Yes.
which clearly states both the duality of the marital relationship, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. As you take a look at the narrative, it's laying out the circumstances, both the positive and the negative, that you will experience as you try to stay together and navigate together. But there are things that come into that picture that will try to divide. And King Solomon wrote quite eloquently this beautiful picture of a cord of three strands. And we know that in the natural, if you take two pieces of string, just old kite string, you take two pieces and wrap it together, you can snap it pretty easily. But if you braid it with three, it's virtually impossible to break it. And so did it miraculously, exponentially get stronger? It does. When you weave God into the equation, it becomes an order, it becomes the compound unity interwoven into the very fabric and the tapestry of marriage. Is this beautiful picture of God being first in the marriage. Therefore, there is a common goal, a common focal point of having an arbiter, having an independent third-party opinion where I'm not pointing at my spouse, I'm taking it to God and leaving certain things at the foot of the cross and saying, listen, I'm not asking you to change her, I'm asking you to change me so that I can see her through your eyes. And unless you have that very intimate relationship with God, you don't realize that He sees her completely differently than you see her. He created her, and without that relationship, without that lens, without that, really the in contract law and torts, unless you know the verbiage, you can't decipher what a certain estoppel means, or words which are incorporated into that contract. If you don't have a relationship with God and His Word, and have the lexicon and understanding of the mind of God and the heart of God, you cannot reflect that back to someone else in a covenant relationship if you don't already have that covenant relationship with God.
Amen. I believe that, I think, is what you just said is the bottom line. We have to understand that we draw from our covenant with God first and foremost in order to make the marriage work. But I do want to go back. I really do believe, Rabbi Eric, that a crucial distinction needs to be made between the contractual thinking and the covenant thinking, because if people come into a marriage and it's my life made better, if that's the purpose of the relationship, as you were saying, when suddenly my life isn't being made better, now it's a crisis. And in the same way with God, if we approach a relationship with God, we think we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and life blows up. Has God failed us? If instead we understand that covenant is designed as a training process, it's not simply a tie that binds, it's actually a huge, massive, multifaceted, multi-layered developmental process to take me as I walk into it, which is a bundle of contradictions, a mess, and a lot of dysfunction, and to take that individual and to grow them up so that they can be useful and constructive citizens in the kingdom of God and in a marriage and in community and whatever else. Now, along the way to get there, we come in with a guidance system that's designed around the things that we have been sold by the world will make our life the best. We may start with fame, money, and power. We may start with hot or whatever we think we need to be our best us and have the best life. What God wants to do often is strip this stuff away from us. And in fact, one of the most valuable lessons we can ever learn is that God is enough. And the only way He can teach us that, facing these adversities, we're facing an adversity. I mean, one thing Holly and I have really learned, well, two things we've learned. One is instead of asking, why me? God, why are you doing this to me? Holly, why are you doing this to me? Instead, ask God, what are you trying to teach me? Other thing that we've learned, Eric, is that we tend to hold up this measuring stick to situations. And that measuring stick, again, has to do with our perception of self-interest. In other words, when we see a situation, does this seem to advance my cause, or does this seem to be eroding or destroying my cause? And we've now lived long enough where we have had a number of situations that were literally worst case scenarios. I mean, this was the worst thing we could ever see happen. But as we have gone along, those things, when approached in a certain way, when approached trying to learn and grow and understand and join together and support each other, as we go about this in the plan that God has, we found that these worst case scenarios became the seedbed from which have grown some of the greatest blessings in our lives. Now, were those things bad? Or were they good? I mean, they look terrible to us, but again, this is where we have to realize that God, first, loves us more than we can imagine. Second, is not going to allow something into our lives that's going to destroy us. If we really get that what God asks of us truly is best for us, and that what comes into our lives, no matter what it feels like or looks like, truly is best for us, if we get that, then we can relax, be anxious for nothing, ask for what we need. We do have legitimate, real needs. And sometimes those aren't met. And it's an important thing in the relationship to really be about the process of learning the real needs of our partner and really meeting those in a growing way. If both people are doing that, if you're in this arms race of trying to outbless each other, that's a pretty good life. That's what God wants to see. But he's got to strip away so much from us to get us to the point where we can do that. We either go with that process or we resist it. And if we resist it, we end up again building and tearing down with each hand. So what we found in covenant, if you understand the whole plan, if you don't understand the plan, these are just random events. There's this big list of things to do. We're not sure why. It doesn't fit together. If we understand covenant, it fits together into this whole that is taking us somewhere. What now appears is a path that perfection is not going to happen. But as parents, what do we want to see with a small child or even a larger child? We want to see the child is listening, the child's trying, the child's attentive, the child's able to be corrected and does better. We want to see progress. So what God wants to see is us walking hand in hand with him down this path that's really going somewhere. And Holly and I were looking back at our lives recently, looking back from the very beginning. And on the one hand, we're still the same us that we were the next morning after we woke up after our wedding. On the other hand, we have become so different. We have grown so much. So many things have been developed in our lives. And, it didn't feel like on any given day that any massive thing was happening necessarily. But looking back, how far we've come and how much we've grown and how deeply rewarding this life is and how gratifying and satisfying this life is. And Eric, that's why I wanted to write this book. I wanted to show people that this is a plan that can be followed, that will get anybody there if you simply see the plan and follow it.
We're talking with Dr. Mark Johnson, author of Book 2 in the Covenant series, The Covenant of Marriage, God's Plan to Produce Deepest Love, Strongest Relationships, Personal Growth, and Transformation. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to break down inform, conform, transform as a concept for covenant marriage. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Dr. Mark Johnson, author of the Covenant series, this book 2 in the Covenant series, The Covenant of Marriage, God's Plan to Produce Deepest Love, Strongest Relationships, Personal Growth, and Transformation. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi Eric. It's great to be here.
Mark, before we went to break, I brought up God's plan for marriage was to inform, conform, and transform, which are 3 pillars of this concept in the covenant for marriage as you lay it out. Break that down for us.
Okay. God wants first to teach us a broader definition of love. The first thing in covenant that we're supposed to do is love the other person as well as we love ourselves. It's like the most fundamental in blood covenants, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But if I love you as well as I love myself, I still may not be loving you very well, because we often don't love ourselves very well either. So God then takes that and he wants to expand our definition of love across the spectrum of life into the correct depth. In other words, to have us reach a point where we can love well and consistently across the spectrum of human life. Now, the first thing he needs to do is teach us these things. You were mentioning earlier wedding vows. And as I went back and compiled the wedding vow individual items and then defined them very fully, that actually corresponds beautifully to the historic understanding of what we're supposed to do in the blood covenant, those duties, obligations, and responsibilities. Those dovetail perfectly. Now, if you look at the scriptures about how we're supposed to treat each other as husbands and wives, and how we're supposed to, in general, love each other, and you look at those injunctions, again, this stuff dovetails perfectly into kind of a 3-pronged approach to get through our heads that this is what this is supposed to look like. Okay, now the motivation. Okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. I've listened to the sermon. I heard, okay, I should be this. We all know how well that works the next week. Maybe, maybe not. But there's a process by which these things are ground into our lives. So we have to look at the motivational system that God builds into the system. First is our hearts. Man, we're head over heels in love with somebody. We're so motivated. We have more energy to love somebody than we've had to do anything ever. The lengths that people will go to find each other, to display love, to that sacrificial, that outpouring, loving thing that happens. Well, God designed that in us so that people doing that back and forth build a certain heart and bond and ultimately get married. Now, we don't always feel that though. Unfortunately, those feelings fade and the other part of our guidance system begins to take over, and we begin to do things based on incorrect priorities that do not reflect who we currently are or the nature of the bond that we're now in. But that's just our habit. That's just the way we roll. This is just me. Well, the first thing we have to realize is that's not just me anymore. Again, in covenant, I've become a new person. So one of the vital things about covenant is realizing the transformation that has occurred in the center of my being. Now, and B, first, we have a new being that is there largely in potential. If you look at what we were like originally as a human being, we're a strand of DNA. Okay, we have unlimited, well, we don't have unlimited potential. We have the potential that God built into us to become all these things. This new being is very much the same. It is there largely in potential. It is being fully expressed. What is being expressed in our life is the guidance system that we drag into this relationship from our single life. So the process then, first of growing this new being and discovering who we really are now. There was a situation early on where I was called to do something I knew by Scripture, and it just felt like so far away from who I was. I remember thinking, that's just not me. And then it occurred to me, well, maybe who I think I am isn't really me anymore. I'm going to try this and just see. I went ahead and went with it, and what I found, what it felt like to do that was, it's like, this is what I wanted to do all along, I just didn't realize it. It's like when we are doing something that is us, that really is an authentic reflection of our being, there's a certain gratification, there's a certain reward that goes with that. So it's the process of finding out who that being is and growing that being, and at the same time dismantling this inappropriate guidance system that we have. God talks about taking off an ill-fitting garment and putting on a new garment that fits. And that's the process of going back and looking at the truth. What's true about me, what's true about my best interest, what's true about what's going to lead to the best life for me, and beginning to take out the things that are contrary to that and insert in my guidance system, grind it into my life in ways that now turn into action these new things. And again, we go into that in the book in some detail about a process for taking things that aren't working. Well, now, how do we find these things we need to change? Simple, conflict and life issues. As we get into a situation where we're now in conflict with our wife,
right.
Think of those as terrible things. Really, that's a great diagnostic tool, because in any of those things, we're going to find opportunities for growth and transformation. So we simply day by day just work through our life, and over time we get to one after another after another. If we're approaching this with a pattern of growth, what we'll see is these things that many people resist, they think are terrible. We had a fight, this is awful, this person hates me. They get into this swirl of emotion and go nowhere. If instead we look at these things as a doorway to growth and transformation for both of us now, and we follow that pattern, we suddenly don't fear these conflicts anymore. In fact, we look forward to them, because the next step of growth for us we see it's making our life and our relationship better. We relax into the process, and it's a good life.
You know, as you were talking, I began to see two gears forming. And when you take a billet, you take a piece of metal and you begin to cut away metal so that those teeth fit and they function, there's a removal, and if it doesn't fit right, there's friction, there's breakage, and sometimes it gets stuck, it gets frozen in place. And so through that refinement process of chipping away and grinding away and smoothing the rough edges, you finally get this gear. You look at the old-time mechanical watches, the analog watches, and the precision of the gear system that is in there required that there be friction, there be heat, there be the removal of things that are impeding the form, fit, and function of the design. And this is our relationship with God. The closer we get to God, the more friction there is, the more our high places get hit by this sandpaper. And we tend to want to pull away because it doesn't feel good, but Hebrews tells us that no discipline feels good at the time. But if we stay in there, if we hang in there, over time, this friction becomes a polishing cloth as opposed to something that's abrasive. The sandpaper changes, but so does the wood. And in this process, the husband and wife, as they stick closer together, saying, okay, there's conflict, this is a call for us to stay close enough together so that we can buffer out, polish out, refine within each other what it is, where that burr is or where that high place is. And so, God uses the things of the natural to reveal supernatural truths to us. And so as I looked at this, I saw this gear system that you were very carefully weaving here, that it's got to be engaged. That's where the power comes from, in the engagement. It's not in the disengagement. It's when those gears engage that they create the impetus for it to make another revolution, and they have to come into contact.
Right. One thing we have to realize too is in this refinement process, this is a voluntary outfit. We can either sign up for this or we can resist it. The thing that most causes us to resist is the sense that this is just me. I remember the stop point of obedience to me with God initially was, this is just me. And what I had to learn to do is make a distinction between what actually is my identity, what is the core of my being, and what are optional add-ons in terms of character that really all reflect decisions I've made about how I'm going to be. These things, once they become habits, once they become our character, once they become things that we do without thinking about them, they begin to feel like us. But these are the very things we often need to get rid of. And some of them go pretty deep. So a lot of these things aren't just simple decisions. Hey, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's about how we feel about certain things. Those feelings we think we can't change, but those feelings are based on a belief system that does need to change. Okay, so if we're really going to go at this thing, we can go back in and subject to review all of these things as they come up as problems. And as we begin to embrace God's truth, instead of just going with what feels like us, like what it used to feel like to me was I was trying to ram a square peg of obedience into a round hole of my nature, and it just didn't fit. And at that point, I'm like, God, didn't you make me this way? But, I misunderstood, again, what is the part of me that should be loved unconditionally versus the part of me that should not be put up with unconditionally, that represents incorrect guidance, that is damaging people around me, that's damaging myself, that I've made peace with, but my wife did not nor should not make peace with. So these are the things that we get pointed out to us that we really need to change. And rather than fighting that, if we begin to really aggressively examine those things in light of God's truth, we'll find a much better life as we go forward.
Well, you clearly architect that. So when we look at this, we see that there is the opportunity for personal growth, as well as that personal growth contributing to the marital growth. So that concept that I lose my identity or I lose myself in this covenant relationship with my spouse really requires that there be independent individual development to become a greater contributor to this covenant, constantly investing into it as opposed to constantly withdrawing from it. And there's no return on investment if you don't add to it or continue to hang in there, even when the market, excuse me, the market may be down a little bit. You still stay in because it's dollar cost averaging. It's the time value, knowing the cyclical nature of a market investment. This is the cyclical nature of a marital investment as well. So when you take a look at your marriage with Holly, when you take a look at what it is that you are laying out in the covenant of marriage, what kind of marriage does that covenant actually build?
And this is the key part, because everything we've talked about up until now sounds like a lot of work. Okay, so where's the return you're talking about? And I go through in the last part of the book, I go through, there are certain things that must be built upon other things. Like we must first speak the truth to each other and be scrupulous about that to the point that we can trust each other's words, period. Then we must not only speak correctly, but we must be fully disclosing. We must be honest, not just truthful, but honest. Then we must be transparent. Transparent is a deeper level where all those little secret hidden things that we don't want anybody to know about from our past or whatever are now out on the table before the Lord, where we both really know each other. Okay, at that point, because until that point, an image that somebody's throwing up there. You don't really know the person. Okay, what God's calling us to do is know and love the individual that's in front of us, and you can't do that unless you go through these steps. Now, from that, we can get to something called intimacy. If we now love and affirm and cherish and honor this individual, not because of, but in light of all of these things, this is the relationship we're building. Now, the safety, the security that comes with that creates an environment in the relationship. There's like a texture of safety in the relationship. This new being that we are is a very tender thing. You're sending up little tender shoots here and there of capacities or things God's leading me to do that are so far away from anything that I have done before. So if we have an environment between us that is this safe and secure place, it's a place where we can both grow to our potential. The whole point is that we begin to authentically express who we are. If we have that environment created in the relationship, God designed this relationship to produce that very growth of these tender things into very strong, parts of our lives and our ministries. We're fully supportive of each other. We're egging each other on to develop these things. You get that kind of thing. Now you get into the level of passion. We're supporting each other's passions and helping develop and sharing in these passions. So that's the kind of life, that wholehearted life we want to be living. But that type of life is literally built one brick at a time. And God's covenant plan is perfectly designed to do that from one end to the other. So what we're ultimately ending up with is a life we really, really are glad we lived. This is, despite all and our lives have been just as full of mess as anybody else's is listening. We have 7 children. We've seen every potential thing that pretty much can happen in lives, in them and their friends and our friends. We live in the real world, but we live in the real world in an experience of living in this joined relationship that is, again, I just wake up every morning blessing God that I get to live this life.
Well, praise God for that report. And this is the outcome of a evolving, still refining, still defining, and growing, because it's a living organism. It's something that has to be fed. It cannot be deprived of light. It cannot be deprived of nourishment. It cannot be deprived of hydration, which is that time of refreshment and renewal. There are seasons, just the same way that there is a season for everything, according to the writings of King Solomon and Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season. And so understanding those seasons in a marriage, and understanding that the covenant stands consistently throughout the seasons, we become conformed and transformed by our commitment to that covenant relationship. We've been talking with Dr. Mark Johnson, author of the Covenant series, and book 2 in the Covenant series, The Covenant of Marriage, God's Plan to Produce Deepest Love, Strongest Relationships, Personal Growth, and Transformation. Visit ignitingnation.com and click on today's broadcast, and you'll see a link to this book. Just click on that and get a copy and begin to understand the covenants and the covenant of marriage as it should be applied to you today. The message for you is you're never too late to start living up to what God desires for you and your marriage. You may have stalled, you may have found that friction exists, but when you step back and you begin to put yourself in right alignment with God, God will reveal to you what you need to do. And your prayer must simply be, Lord, let there be change, but let it begin with me. Dr. Mark Johnson, thank you, my friend, for being with us for this second visit. And we look forward to book 3 in the Covenant series and having you back on to talk about that.
Eric, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.